beauties, it is Cara the Bubblelush. So I had a request to talk about breastfeeding, and more specifically to compare and contrast my experiences breastfeeding Hannah versus William, which I think is an excellent topic to discuss because I'll get into more detail about this in a second, but my experience breastfeeding Hannah was so different than from breastfeeding William, and I think that this is really great to talk, especially to new moms or moms that are expecting baby number 2 that it might had a really bad experience with baby number 1, that just because it didn't go as well the first time doesn't mean it's going to be as bad the second time. It might still be, but there is hope. So that's excellent, right? Okay, so for those of you that are new to my channel, let's go back and do just a little bit of a recap of what my experience was with Hannah, and then I'll talk about my experience with William. And let's start with just kind of comparing and contrasting what was going on in my life at that time. So first of all, Hannah, of course, was my first baby, and she taught me how to breastfeed, and I taught her how to breastfeed. So we were really learning together. We were in the trenches, and it was really, really tough. I was a working mom. I went back to work at 7 weeks postpartum, and she weaned when she was 14 months. William, on the other hand, my second baby, I already knew what I was doing, and so I just had to teach him. He had to learn, but I was a pro at that point. I was a stay-at-home mom for him, and he is currently 13.5 months and still totally going strong. So I think he's gonna beat Hannah's 14-month record. All right, so now that you kind of know, one, I was a working mom, one, I was a stay-at-home mom, one, I pumped and bottle fed and nursed on demand, and the other one, with William, I just solely nursed on demand. So, huge differences, right? Okay, so let's get into some details now. So with Hannah's labor and delivery, I had a lot of things going against me of trying to get that milk coming in. I have PCOS, I had a really long and kind of traumatic labor and delivery with her. I'll include a link to her labor and delivery video down below if you want to know more about that. It takes too long to get into. And then I had a C-section, and she went to the NICU immediately after birth, so I didn't have that skin-to-skin contact with her that really helps getting all those hormones flowing and getting your milk going. So my milk didn't come in until, I believe Hannah was like 6 days old. Because she went to the NICU, she was given bottles of formula, kind of against my will, but it happens. And so I used an SNS kit, which I also have a video. I'm going to link a bunch of videos down below, so if I reference them, just check them out if you want to know more. I used an SNS kit, which I think is great to have in your arsenal if you are a breastfeeding mom with a newborn. If you're pregnant and you want to breastfeed, know about an SNS kit because it could come in handy for you, and you never know until you're in the situation where you need one. But I used that with her for the first 6 days to really kind of help her transition from formula to the breast. And from that point on, from the time she was like 6 days old and my milk came in, and ooh, it came in, she was purely on breast milk. So like I said, I went back to work when she was 7 weeks old, so sooner than I wanted, and I worked 10-hour shifts, plus I had an hour commute on both ends. So I was gone from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. accounting for traffic. So that's a really long time to be away from your baby. So what I would do is I would nurse. I would wake up at, I think, about 4 o'clock. I'm so glad I'm not working anymore. That sounds awful. I think I woke up about 4 o'clock, would nurse her and pump a bottle in the morning. And then I would pump 3 times at work. I would pump at 9 o'clock, noon, and 2:30, 3 o'clock. And then, you know, I'd get home and she would nurse as soon as I walked through the door. She was screaming and yelling and she wanted to be nursed. So she nursed at 6:30. So we did a combination of, as you see, of both breastfeeding when I was home and bottle feeding when I was at work. And that meant that I was a pumping mom. So I kind of feel like I experienced it all with Hannah. Now, when you become a pumping mom, you realize that there are a lot of tips and tricks to boost your supply, and I should probably just make a whole other video about it because the list is extensive. And when you ask for help about, you know, ways to increase your supply and boost your supply, you're going to get a lot of these suggestions. So I tried them. I promise you I tried them. I tried multiple different pumps as well, and I just really didn't respond very well to the pump. So pumping was very, very difficult for me, and it was very stressful for me. I knew exactly how much milk I needed to bring home every day. And when I didn't meet that cutoff and I would have to dip into my freezer stash, it was so incredibly stressful. Incredibly stressful. I actually just went back and I watched my breastfeeding update that I made when Hannah was 6 months old, just to kind of remind myself of where I was at that point. And I can feel, it takes me right back when I watch that video, and I can feel the stress just like radiating off of me when I'm talking about my supply. So supply was definitely an issue starting at about 6 months. Even though we had introduced solids, her appetite was, you know, through the roof. She's a big kid, and I was starting to not meet it. And by 9 months, we had completely exhausted our freezer supply. And I actually had to use donor breast milk to kind of supplement what I wasn't able to pump at work. So thankfully I had a local friend here, Jessica, and she was able to donate her breast milk freezer supply to Hannah. And so I still pumped at work, and then if I was 2, 3, 4 ounces short that day, I pulled from Jessica's stash. So she basically replaced my freezer stash, which I'm so incredibly thankful for, because we started using it at 9 months and it allowed me to continue breastfeeding until 14 months. So that's incredible, an extra 5 months that I would have had to supplement, you know, formula or maybe starting to incorporate whole milk once she turned a year. And I didn't have to do that because I had that donor breast milk. So that was a real blessing for our family. Also, another huge thing with Hannah is that she had a frenulum lip tie. This is one of those little traits that I give my kids, apparently. So my husband passes on his cute little button nose, and I pass on, apparently, a labial lip tie. Do you guys know what this is? It's basically, if you take a clean little finger and stick it between your top teeth and your upper lip, up here, right here. If you go all the way to the top, there is a tiny band of skin that kind of connects your lip to your gum. But with my children, and me as a child as well, I had mine cut, that band of skin extends all the way down and between their front teeth. And sometimes, like with Hannah, it connects all the way back behind their front teeth as well. It's called a labial lip tie. You'll hear a lot about being tongue-tied, which is kind of the same thing. It's a band of skin, but that's underneath your tongue. And that means that the baby can't extend their tongue out. I'm gonna look so weird if I do this, but they can't extend their tongue out. And because of that, they can't wrap their tongue around the nipple and suck. But Hannah and William, they have the labial lip tie, so they're not able to flange their upper lip out because there's just not that flexibility. Their lip is real close to their teeth because you just can't pull it. It's bound tight to their teeth. This is very weird to explain, but hopefully you're kind of understanding. So when you're breastfeeding, it's really good to have the lips flanged out around the nipple, and she couldn't do that. She wrapped her lip under. So there was always a break in the suction. So she really tore up my nipples a lot, and when she was about 6 months, it finally got to the point where she was a big enough kid and had strong enough suction that she was actually really hurting me, and I think that was also impacting my supply as well. So we took her to an ear, nose, and throat doctor to have it kind of examined and get his input on it, and he said it was one of the tightest he'd ever seen. Just to give you an idea, it was so tight that it was actually starting to distort her smile, because, you know, when you smile, your lip comes up, and hers wasn't. It's basically kind of tacked in place. So she was like trying to smile like this, and it was just distorting her smile. He took this little tool and clipped the tie, and, you know, she's 6 months old, so she cried for like a couple minutes. Within an hour, she was able to nurse, and the next day it was totally healed. So really not a big deal. And the improvement, not only in just her ability to smile that next day, she was able to smile, but she was able to actually latch on. We had a consult as well with a pediatric dentist, and they were concerned with how far it came back between her front teeth. And once we had it cut, we had her brought back to the dentist for another consult, and they said that it looked really good, that it was no longer going to impact her front teeth. So, and it hasn't. Now I can see the way that they grow in, and I'm really glad that we had it cut when we did. It seemed kind of harsh, and I have a video actually up about it where you can kind of see in the doctors. I don't film the actual procedure because I was having heart palpitations at the time, but it ended up being not a big deal, and it was totally worth it in the long run, totally worth it. So 6 months was a really pivotal point in our breastfeeding relationship because that's when her labial lip tie was cut, and so her latch and my enjoyment of breastfeeding her started to really increase because it was no longer painful, but also her appetite became so big and my supply really kind of got to that breaking point where I was no longer pumping enough, and so my supply started going down. So it was really weird that just as soon as I started enjoying breastfeeding more, I started hating pumping even more because it was so stressful. So it was a tough year, but it was totally worth it. And we worked through a lot of those ups and downs, and we weaned when both of us were ready. Now with William. William was, you know, he was born at 41.5 weeks. He was 9 pounds, so he didn't have any strength issues or anything like that. He did go to the NICU for 4 hours, but we were able to see him in the recovery and have some skin to skin. So I feel like being only separated for a couple hours really helped my milk come in. I think it came in while I was at the hospital, that's for sure. I think on day 2, maybe day 3. And supply was just never an issue with him. You know, if you take the breastfeeding classes and they teach you the holds with the little dolls and stuff, and you're like, okay, I kind of see how this works, but it's not until you actually do it with a baby, with your baby, that you really learn all the little nuances of getting their chin and the latch and everything just right in their nose. Oh, it's really hard. It's a hard art. The art of breastfeeding is hard to learn. So if you're struggling with it, especially those little positions, I totally get it. Keep at it and try to find a lactation consultant to help you because it's hard to teach yourself. You got to have someone that knows what they're doing teach you. And I worked really closely with the lactation consultant for the first probably 4 months of Hannah's life, and such a blessing. So I already knew how to do all the positions. I just had to figure out which one William preferred. And for C-section moms, one to know how to do well is the football hold. Know how to do that one because you're not going to want to have any weight on your tummy. It's all off to the side. And you really get to kind of snuggle that baby up under your arm, kind of have the pillows and everything, and then you're just holding that head right on your boob. So the football hold, make sure you're familiar with that, especially if you're kind of concerned with C-section. But really, C-section can happen to anybody, so know the football hold. That's a good one. Have that little tip in your back pocket. So with William, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was basically just able to breastfeed him on demand. And personally, I'm so glad that he has a breastfed baby. We dealt with reflux for the first, maybe 9-10 months. Probably he was about 10 months when he grew out of it. And breastfeeding was just super comforting to him. He actually had a milk protein allergy, so I had to cut all dairy out of my diet for at least the first 6 months, probably about 7 months is when he outgrew that. So if he had been formula fed, he would have to be on a super specific formula that didn't have the dairy. So it was just easier for me to go on a dairy-free diet and breastfeed him and not have to pay the ridiculous prices of that specialty formula. So for us, it really worked out well. For me, it was really tough to not eat the dairy and cheese and yogurt and ice cream and all that fun stuff, but it was ultimately worth it to do for him. It was a pretty easy sacrifice to make. So like I said, William had reflux for the first 10 months of his life. He nursed a lot. The poor guy was just really in pain. If you're familiar at all with reflux, it's hard, it's stressful, and it's emotionally draining because it's not just that your baby cries a lot, it's that your baby is in pain. And that's really hard to see day in and day out. And so for us being able, well, for me being able to breastfeed him and for him being able to breastfeed and just really bond and relax, that was so comforting for us. And so because he had reflux, it was easier for him to just drink small meals often. That way his stomach didn't get too full and he wasn't, you know, burping up milk back into his mouth. If he ate a lot, he would burp or throw it all up. So he nursed small meals and often. And when I say often, I mean he nursed every 60 to 90 minutes around the clock for 10 months. I'm pretty sure that when you say that to people, when you say my baby nurses every 60 to 90 minutes, they're like, sure he does. No, really, he does. All throughout the night, everything. So he slept in a co-sleeper, and we just made it work. And thank goodness I wasn't working outside the home, because I was pretty much a zombie for the first 7 months. But ultimately, even if I had to get up and make a bottle for him or nurse him, he still needed to be having small meals and often. So it was actually easier to breastfeed him because I could just breastfeed him in bed. When I was done, I set him back in the co-sleeper. I didn't have to get out of bed and make bottles. So I know some people are like, why don't you just switch to formula at this point? But really for us, breastfeeding was easier, even with all these issues, even with the dairy sensitivity, the reflux, nursing often, all this kind of stuff. It was ultimately still easier just to breastfeed. Now I have a 13-and-a-half-month-old little boy that is running around crazy. He's always bonking his head and falling down. And anytime that happens, anytime he starts crying, all I have to say is, "You want to nurse?" And he immediately stops crying. He runs over to me and he nurses. So it's nice to be able to still offer that comfort to him. And for us, it's just so easy. It's really easy for me to nurse a toddler. Because like when you're nursing a newborn, they're just this beautiful little baby and they lay there and they look at you, and of course getting the positions and everything is hard, but it's just this like serene, you know, you're in the glider and you're just cooing at your baby and so in love. But now nursing a toddler, you know, I can do it anywhere. I can be on the couch. I can really be pretty much anywhere. And he just kind of either sits on my lap or sits next to me. He can nurse while like watching TV. We don't have to really worry about nursing positions and having his head. He just knows how to do it. And so it's really easy. It's just very fluid, and it's not a big production. It's just not a big deal. When he needs to nurse, he nurses, and then when he's done, he pops off and he runs away. So it's just been so amazingly different. Hannah's was so rewarding because we taught each other, and you know, you only learn how to do that once type of thing. Like, that's just kind of a bond that her and I have as far as breastfeeding goes, is that we taught each other how to do this. And, you know, she taught me how to be a mom, ultimately. And that's always just going to be a place in my heart that Hannah has. It just is. But we had a lot of issues with her latch, with me going back to work, with pumping. Oh, I just hated pumping. So going from that experience with Hannah of, you know, kind of losing my supply right around the 9-month mark, having to use donor milk, all those things. And then going to the situation with William, where even though I had to alter my diet significantly and he nursed a lot, we never really had issues. He hardly ever took a bottle. He basically just nurses on demand. And even now, as a toddler, sometimes I'll give him a sippy cup of whole milk, like to have with dinner, and he still prefers breast milk. I can still see him as soon as he takes a sip, he's like, this is the fake stuff. So it's been a very different experience, but both equally rewarding. And I just want to let those women know, especially if you had a rough time or if you're going through a rough time, just ask for help. There are tons of women out there that have been right there in your shoes, and they will help you. And you can always ask me. You can either send me a private message here or on Facebook, or send me an email, bubblelush@gmail.com, and I will try to do whatever I can do to help you, because I know how hard and how stressful it can be. It truly is the art of breastfeeding, and it's tough to learn. So I get it. And there are a lot of hurdles that you can face. I totally understand. So if I can be a resource for you, let me do that for you. And then I also want to let you know that just because you had a bad or rough experience with one child doesn't mean it's going to repeat itself with the second. You learn so much from baby to baby, plus just the babies themselves are completely different. So you kind of never know what you're going to face, and it can always be better, right? Okay. So tonight I actually asked Facebook, I got on my Facebook and asked if they had any breastfeeding questions. And last time I looked, there was a lot. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this video up, because I think I answered the questions. I compared and contrast my experience with Hannah versus William. And then I'm going to start filming a breastfeeding Q&A questions, because these are so wildly different all over the place, but they are fantastic questions. Things that I would never have thought of. So I think I'm just going to separate these out into two, because this one has already gotten long enough and it is going to be a booger to edit. So thanks so much for the question, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.